example, whenever I present it to people, their first, I mean, it's amazing, right? But their first reaction, like a self-defense almost, is that it's numerology, right? It's just a play with numbers. Numerology. That's the first reaction. So, and that's their loss. But it's actually not a numerology. It's actually a structure, much like a building is a structure that is designed according to specifics. Like there's a specification for everything. How many bolts? For example, in a skyscraper, if you design it in a certain way where you have to use a lot of bolts, then that increases the overall weight of the entire skyscraper. So you have to be mindful of that as an engineer. So yeah, so you have to keep working on it and redesign and make it perfect. To yeah, so every bolt is accounted for. So there's a structure to it. It's a design. There's a purpose, and that's what we see in the Quran. Every word, every chapter, every verse, every word, and every letter is specifically designed in the Quran. It's beyond human capability. It's truly amazing. But you can only see it when you study it. So yeah. But you can recognize someone who has been sent astray when they respond by saying, "Oh, it's numerology," because the angel that was responsible for them have is part of the plan to keep this person in disbelief. So so they are locked into disbelief, and there's nothing they can do about it. And of course, the jinn plays a role as well, but the angels also have a responsibility to obey God's commands. So if God makes a plan, and God has seen that, and God knows the innermost, God knows the destiny of everyone. So if someone is destined for hell, then the angels will work with God to make that happen, so to speak. So it's very, you don't want to be in that situation. That's why it's called submission. The religion is called submission. You submit to God. You can't have an ego. If you have an ego, then God will say, I'm paraphrasing now. Like, okay, we'll use my own words instead. It's basically, okay, go guide yourself. Yeah, if you have an ego, then you're your own God. Okay, then go guide yourself. But if you want God's guidance, you have to submit, total submission. And that's where people fail, most people. Okay, let's continue. We placed galaxies in the sky and adorned it for the beholders, and we guarded it against every rejected devil. If any of them sneaks around to listen, a mighty projectile will chase him back. As for the earth, we constructed it and placed on it stabilizers, mountains, and we grew on it a perfect balance of everything. We made it habitable for you and for creatures you do not provide for. This is a footnote. When we send astronauts into space, we provide them with precisely measured quantities of food, water, and oxygen. God created the spaceship Earth with billions of astronauts who work and reproduce. He supplied them with a self-supporting system that generates oxygen, fresh water, and a great variety of delicious foods and drinks. So, just quick comments here. An interesting perspective is to look at this earth as the Rashad says in the footnote. If we look at the earth as a spaceship, if you can imagine that, how amazing and how scary that we are on this like rock, round rock, middle of the nowhere, space, just black every direction, darkness, and so tiny, and there's like almost infinite space in all directions. And the only thing separating you from death, cold, slow, miserable death, is the atmosphere, which we read in the Quran is being held up by God through invisible pillars. And we know those pillars are basically systems like gravity, the rotation of the earth, and all that stuff. So that's an interesting thought and scary. And it's adorned. We placed galaxies in the sky and adorned it for the beholders. So imagine if space was just, if there were no galaxies, just Earth and our solar system, that's it. There's nothing else to look at. That would be very boring. But God, the most merciful, gave us galaxies in the sky for us to look at and behold and be amazed. So we got to be grateful for that. So let's continue. Verse 21. There is nothing that we do not own infinite amounts thereof, but we send it down in precise measure. And we send the winds as pollinators and cause water to come down from the sky for you to drink. Otherwise, you could not keep it palatable. It is we who control life and death, and we are the ultimate inheritors. And we fully know those among you who advance, and we fully know those who regress. Your Lord will surely summon them. He is the most wise. He is most wise, omniscient. So a quick comment here. Verse 21. There is nothing that we do not own infinite amounts thereof, but we send it down in precise measure. This is, of course, talking about everything, including rain and all that stuff. But I'm going to limit my comment to personal income or whatever, like personal stuff. This, like some people, hippies, I like to call them hippies, they just relax, everything will solve itself and whatever. That's their mentality, but that's not how it should be. Yes, God controls everything and sends down everything, and everything has a predestined time before it gets to you, but you have to put in the effort to earn it, right? There's an earning system. In the Quran, God says, God withholds and gives. God withholds from those who don't deserve, and God gives to those who work hard. That's the system. It's an earning system. You can't sit in a couch and expect everything to come to you. But what you can learn from this verse is, don't stress, don't complain, trust in God. This is what the verse is trying to tell us. From a personal, if you're thinking about personal income, don't stress, don't be worried, trust God. Always trust God. Just do your part, and God will reward you, give you what you need. Verse 22, and we send the winds as pollinators and cause water to come down from the sky for you to drink. Otherwise, you cannot keep it palatable. Now, if we look at how the water evaporates from the ocean, goes up into the sky, the winds then drives all that evaporated water into much denser quantities, and then it rains down. That's how it's purified. And that's an amazing system that we should appreciate, because if we compare it to the amount of energy and resources that is needed for us to clean ocean water and make it drinkable, then it's a very long process, very expensive process as well. And it's not the same, because there are additives. The water that is cleaned by various states and cities, they contain chemicals, and they add chemicals and whatever to clean it from bacteria and whatever, because you can't filter out certain things. But when water evaporates, you're literally purifying the water. Not 100%, but it's the purest form of water when you like drinkable. It is when you evaporate. 100% pure water is not that good. But you get the point. So let's continue. Subtitle: The Human Race, verse 26. We created the human being from aged mud, like the potter's clay. As for the jinns, we created them before that from blazing fire. Your Lord said to the angels, I am creating a human being from aged mud, like the potter's clay. Once I perfect him and blow into him from my spirit, you shall fall prostrate before him. The angels fell prostrate, all of them, except Iblis, Satan. He refused to be with the prostrators. He said, O Iblis, Satan, why are you not with the prostrators? He said, I am not to prostrate before a human being, whom you created from aged mud, like the potter's clay. He said, therefore you must get out, you are banished. You have incurred my condemnation until the day of judgment. He said, my Lord, respite me until the day they are resurrected. He said, you are respited until the specific day and time. He said, "My Lord, since you have willed that I go astray, I will surely entice them on earth. I will send them all astray, except those among your worshippers who are devoted absolutely to you alone." He said, "This is a law that is inviolable. You have no power over my servants. You only have power over the strayers who follow you, and hell awaits them all. It will have 7 gates. Each gate will get a specific share of them. As for the righteous, they will enjoy gardens and springs. Enter therein, peaceful and secure. We remove all jealousy from their hearts, like one family. They will be on adjacent furnishings. Never will they suffer any fatigue therein. Never will they be evicted therefrom. Inform my servants that I am the forgiver, most merciful, and that my retribution is the most painful retribution." Let's see here. Okay, let's see. Just a couple of quick comments. In verse 27, as for the jinns, we created them before that from blazing fire. Okay, maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but the jinns were created before us. And here's a verse 29. There are some submitters out there who are trying to corrupt the religion by introducing circumcision and other practices. And this verse specifically and directly, in my view, it directly opposes them and counters their reasoning. Surah 15, verse 29. Once I perfect him, and blow into him from my spirit, you shall fall prostrate before him. So the word, what I'm looking for here is the first part of the sentence. Once I perfect him. So God created us perfectly. We are a perfect design. Like, why would you circumcise? It makes no sense. God made us perfect. There's no flaw in God's design. And then some people will, the human being is the most argumentative creature, because and that's the consequence of ignorance. You argue because you're seeking validation or knowledge or understanding. That's why we argue, because we are ignorant creatures. So what these people, the circumcisionists, as I like to call them, they like to argue and say, oh, but it's healthy, like it protects against certain diseases and whatever if you circumcise. Well, those diseases exist when you don't take care of your health. If you don't shower, then you are a dirty person. Like you're, yeah, dirty, like disgusting. Like go take a shower, go take a bath. So it's a very bad and lousy argument that they bring to the table, and it only exposes their disbelief. It exposes that they're hiding something, like some agenda of some sort, or maybe just plain old ignorance. Let's continue. So let's look at God's response or action or decision, whatever you want to call it. So Satan rejects, he doesn't submit or prostrate, not submit, prostrate. Doesn't prostrate as God's commanded everyone to do. And because of that, God says, get out, you are banished. You have incurred my condemnation until the day of judgment. From just disobeying. Yet we have this culture in the world where people are very very tolerant when they shouldn't be tolerant. They are very forgiving when they shouldn't be forgiving. There lacks some sort of sternness. Like when we see evil, we have to counter it. We have to scold it. For example, if you have a friend that does bad things, then threaten your friend. You're not gonna hang out with him or her or them because you don't want to be in that group. You don't want to be associated with such an individual. Right? You're scolding them for their bad behavior. And I think it comes with age. As we age, we understand better the balance between when to forgive and when to scold. And of course, God gives Satan, God respites him for a specific day and time until the day of resurrection. And a quick comment here on 36. Satan says, "My Lord, respite me until the day they are resurrected." So we know that the jinns don't die when we die. So it is just the human being that gets resurrected, not the jinns or whatever. And here is the price for disobeying God. And Satan says it himself. In 39, Satan says, "My Lord, since you have willed that I go astray, I will surely entice them on earth. I will send them all astray." So that's God's will. God wills that Satan goes astray. God doesn't want Satan anymore. Satan is a disobedient creature. So Satan made his choice. And God's will is that Satan goes astray. Because Satan already made that choice. And I think in some verses, I don't recall which, but Satan is destined for hell. So there's no coming back for him. Going to hell. And he knows it. Because he says, "My Lord." So he acknowledges that God is God. God is his Lord. But it's too late. He disobeyed. God wills that he goes astray. So then Satan threatens God and says, "I'm going to entice them on earth, right? I will send them all astray." So Satan is active. That's his purpose. Satan's purpose, infinite purpose in life. Like I can say Satan's purpose in life, and you would imagine 100 years, the human span, the human years, or whatever. No, that's not it. Satan's sole purpose, his whole goal, his only goal in his existence, infinite existence, not infinite, but eternal existence, is to entice us, the human being, to send us astray. So that's his mission, and he's active. So our most ardent enemy is Satan. And you have to live your life thinking like that. We have to, every day, we wake up, we say La ilaha illallah, and we begin our day in the name of God, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and we see our enemy, and we proclaim our enemy. You don't have to proclaim it, like who cares about Satan, but you have to be aware that you have an enemy. You have an enemy that is out to get you, that wants to send you astray, and only God's protection can help you against him. You don't have the knowledge, the wisdom. We, the human being, we don't have the strength, the power, the access, the authority, or anything to protect ourselves from Satan, who is this massive, powerful creature. All we have is God's protection. And that's all we need. That's the best protection. So we have to wake up every day and emphasize that we are not on the edge, but we could be on the edge, on a thin line between like heaven or hell, but that's such an abstract allegory or abstract examples. It's more like our destruction or life, like happiness and whatever, or whether we are good or evil, because that's the consequence if you fall into Satan's trap. You become an evil person. So if you want to be a good person, you have to wake up, you proclaim La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, and you dedicate your day to God by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm gonna spend this day in the name of God, and you are aware that you have an enemy out there who wants to send you astray, and your only protection is God. You yourself can't do anything. You have to rely on God. You have to seek refuge in God. Make it a daily habit, like every hour. Seek refuge in God every hour at least. Because you have an enemy. You have literally an invincible enemy that wants to destroy you. Like, literally. I mean, try to comprehend, however fictitious it might sound, or strange, or weird, or unrealistic, or unreal. It's not. It is real. You have an invisible enemy that wants to destroy you. Not physically alone, not just physically, but spiritually. And not for a year, a day, not a day, year, or 100 years, or this life, but for eternity. Satan wants to destroy us, you, me, and all the believers, for eternity. And I will end my reading there.
Masha Allah, thank you.
Thanks, Ahmad.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good job.
Oh,
Masha Allah, I'm supporting studies.
I'm gonna have to go and do my salah and put some food on the stove, so be right back.
thank you, so kind.
Yalla, start
We're not.
discussing.
No, he said, inshallah.
Oh,
Can I make a comment? Salāmun
yeah.
Alaykum.
Salāmun Alaykum.
Hey, the part about, there's a lot of comments I want to make, but I'll go with this part. The creation. I think Steve would like this subject. The creation. Oh man, I'm lost. Trying to keep separate tabs. Where does it start? The creation of the earth. How did I lose it? Oh, okay. Starting with verse 19. As for the earth, we constructed it and placed on its stabilizers mountains. We grew on it a perfect balance of everything. We made it habitable for you and for creatures you do not provide for. The creation of the earth. If you go to chapter 65, verse 12. 7 universes and 7 earths. God created 7 universes and the same number of earths. The commands flow among them. This is to let you know that God is omnipotent that God is fully aware of all things. And then Rashad put a footnote, although God created 6 other planets that are identical to our Earth, there is life only on our planet. Thus, the evolutionists will be shown on the day of judgment that life did not just evolve on the planet because of its particular circumstances. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm done with the comment.
Salãmun Alaykum, everyone.
Alaykum salam.
About the what he was saying about the 6 universes, I think you guys probably know that, but I'll just share that they discover a star that has 6 or 7 Earth-like uh, planets. They rotate around it, and they saying that they all have life possible on them. It's 40 light year from Earth, so they're working on it to learn more about it. I guess when they learn more, and probably they will see that they have trees and water. I mean, not any living thing, but life is possible, but there's not a living creature there. That will probably be a sign for human being that that it was not an accident that we have life on Earth.
Also, I always like how this verse talks about verse 47 talks about how we remove all jealousy from their hearts. Like one family, they will be on just and furnishing. So, I mean, in this world, some people can be very righteous, but it's still a feeling that is easy to fall into. When we see something that someone else has and we don't have it, and we tend to get envious or there's jealousy. Yeah, but on the day of judgment, there will be no jealousy. But you know, imagine if the jealousy was not removed in the hereafter. I mean, and you saw you saw like you're living in heaven, and then let's say, and then you have a friend who has a better who has better luxuries in their heaven, and then you you might get jealous, and but that will be a feeling of uneasiness that doesn't make you feel happy, and God makes sure that all those kinds of emotions, negative emotions are not present at all. So that's a amazing blessing from God, because when we do get jealous, we tend to forget and we don't appreciate what we have, and we think about what we don't have also. Uh, and yeah, that's what I wanted to add there.
Masha Allah, that's a good point.
Yeah, this is very good. One thing about jealousy is that what if those, this is actually a question, that those who go into hell, will God remove their jealousy too? And if not, then that will be another form of punishment. And when they will see their friends or who they used to mock, they're in a nice place. So will they be jealous? And if they will be, then that would be, I mean, another form of punishment. Like you, day and night, you'll be jealous that what they have and I don't have it. So that's a question.
I mean, definitely it will be like a lot of regret and remorse. So
Lobby going down.
I think that in itself is pretty bad.
You know, like in their everyday life, when we lose something, or like, we have that feeling in our heart, burning feeling that, oh, I wish I would have done this, I would have that, and then we have remorse, we feel sad about it. So that is another form of punishment, I think.
Can I say something about that? Everybody okay? Okay, I'll go ahead. When I see this verse, of course, everybody will be happy who makes it to paradise. And there'd be no reason for jealousy at that point. Doesn't matter if somebody has a higher heaven, you're going to be very happy, and it's a victory. That's after Judgment Day. What's the other thing? Oh man, it's melting away from my brain as I talk. There's another thing about this. How do I say this? To me, it also seems to be like, this is just what I think. If you go to chapter 2, verse 213, of course, this is before Judgment Day, but the people used to be one community when God sent the prophets as bearers of good news, as well as warners. We sent down to them the scripture, bearing the truth to judge among the people in their disputes. Ironically, those who received the scripture were the ones who rejected any new scripture, despite clear proofs given to them. This is due to jealousy on their part. God guides those who believe to the truth that is disputed by all others. In accordance with his will, God guides whoever wills in a straight path. Footnote: all worshippers of God alone from all religions are truly united. Subtitle: disastrous jealousy. The way I see that, and there's a few other verses that make me think that these people who don't have jealousy on their hearts, because they didn't allow that to prevent them from being submitters. So one of the steps towards making it, because this jealousy is disastrous, and if you don't get rid of it, you're not going to end up in this position, paradise. It's kind of weird. I'm trying to word it, but I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, jealousy is not a positive feeling or something that any of us should have, right? But the thing is that like we might be jealous in some areas and not in other areas, for example. But there might be traces of jealousy even like among people who are still very righteous, but like when it comes to like little things, sometimes, maybe uh, and even if you have those little traces, the way I see when it says we'll remove all jealousy, like there will be like zero jealousy left among us. That won't even be a thing.
I think whenever you're jealous, you're directly objecting to God, because God is the one who provides.
Hmm.
He gives whatever He gives to anyone. And if someone has more than me, and if I'm being jealous, then I'm directly objecting to God, that why God gave him more and has to me.
Hmm. Yeah, also, I think I really like Ahmed's explanation of Satan, like how he described your enemy, invincible enemy, whose goal is to physically destroy you for eternity. This was put really well, I think. Masha Allah. And
I did a keyword search of the word jealousy in the Quran, and most of it is towards religion. Most of it is things that cause people to not follow submission. Not so much about material things. Most of the verses. Jealousy that God would guide somebody. 2105, jealousy condemned. Neither the disbelievers among the followers of Scripture nor the idol worshippers wish to see any blessings come down to you from your Lord. Horrible. Sometimes when we were having debates about certain topics that people came to this, they came up with interpretations. I don't like to use the word understandings because if you don't have it right, then you don't understand it. The actual word for that is called misunderstanding. So it's not your understanding. So it's your interpretation, which is a misunderstanding. But everybody likes to say your understandings, but I say misunderstanding. So a lot of people came out with interpretations, and there have been big debates about it. And sometimes I notice it actually seems like egotistical and jealousy that they just don't want to listen. They're really stubborn. They're really set on their interpretation, and they're almost like they cannot humble themselves, and they fortify and they build up all these arguments like building a fort and around them. And they just fight instead of just stop being jealous that somebody else knows and you don't, and you're wrong. Just be humble. Sometimes I see it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call them lies. Straight up.
Yeah.
Because they're just lies.
I mean, we all have, you know, we understand things a little bit differently, you know, so we should have that buffer zone between each of us. That buffer zone should carry that, you know, there are going to be some things that we may not agree on, and let's put that on buffer, and we shall agree on that, on major stuff. And you know, and then what you comment about his ultimate, Satan's ultimate goal is to make us go hell. That's his the ultimate goal, and he knows very well that the only unforgivable sin is idol worship. That anyone beside God can help you or hurt you. You're entering in the territory of idol worship, and he will try any possible way, no matter what, day and night, to push you into that boundary. You know, and jealousy is one of them. When you're jealous or you have ego in yourself, you're entering that territory of idol worship, that you're thinking that somebody can help me, or somebody can hurt me, you know, or in any other form. So we should always watch out for that.
Yeah, I think like when I say that I call them lies, or like there's things that we know that like we can have different understanding about like what was going on in Moses' head, or or things like more subtle things. But let's say when it comes to your practices and your beliefs, we know that we have a set of defined laws, any laws in the Quran for that matter. We have a set of defined laws that we have to accept. And then, but God says in the Quran that, people will attribute lies and fabricate lies and blaspheme against God. So those things we have to be clear about, that you have to call it for what it is. I mean, like God could also say, well, like there are these people that have their understanding, and they and things, but he just says, they're who are more evil, and those who fabricate lies and attribute them to God. Like, for example, someone who is who invented the Trinity. Like, I possibly couldn't say, well, that's his understanding. And he believes that they believe that God is one, but that's just their understanding that it's like three forms. I mean, God says no, they're pagans indeed, or those who say that he's one of the Trinity, for example. And so people who the same way, people who tampered with the Quran and added the two false verses. I mean, they fabricated lies and attributed them to God by saying that these were verses from Quran, and obviously for idolizing Muhammad against his will. So those are deliberate acts of Satan that are used to corrupt the religion, for example. As we can see, that is something which is going on right now. But I mean, the reason I feel we talk about it, and it seems like we talk about it a lot, maybe in
Yeah, I mean, if whatever you believe, you know, God will make that adorn in your eyes. If you disbelieve, and you know, God will make your path charming for you, and you may spend whole your life worshiping something, and at the end you will find out all barren land.
Sorry, I got disconnected. I don't know uh, how much you guys heard, but I thought I was uh, talking, making a comment. But what I was saying was uh, that it's a deliberate act of Satan, to try to inject into the religion, and as we can see, that is something that is happening right now with circumcision, for example. And I think we tend to. It seems like we talk about it all the time, and sometimes and people might get annoyed by it too. But I think it's something that God wants us to hear about, even because uh, I think people also need to be aware of the seriousness of what's happening. I mean, adding additional practices into our religion, which has been purified by God's messenger of the covenant. Obviously, it was God's will to purify it, and now Satan is deliberately at it, and he wants us to um, have this sort of tolerance for it. It's like, okay, well, that's their understanding, and let them have this understanding. So give them that comfort that this that I make it like not a big deal, and it can be like propagated easily without any sort of strong opposition, and I think but it's important for the submitters uh, to be united, against these types of innovations. So when people come up with these ideas, that they should find they should find strong opposition, and we should talk about it. Yeah. So I mean, innovations, because innovations, the messenger of the covenant also went in great detail about it. Like innovations will creep up on us if we're not careful, God, and that's why God tells us to examine all inherited information. Examine all inherited traditions. I mean, this is mentioned so many times over and over in the Quran. But then it just baffles us when we see people not do that anymore, because they literally just leave all of that to the messenger. Well, okay, well, the messenger didn't specifically name this and this tradition, and then why are you telling me this? And then blaming you for saying that the messenger did not do his job by not saying that this practice and this tradition is wrong. But I think what the right way to look at it would be, okay, well, the messenger did his job and he told you what practices and explained to you in great detail what practices you should follow and gave proof for it. So if you're saying that he there are other practices, then you're saying that the messenger did not do their job. You're saying that the messenger forgot, which we know that the messenger, God says, they will always complete their job. So that's all.
Can I make a little different comment?
Great.
Can you hear me? I don't know if I'm
Yes.
disconnected. Okay, I just want to make a different comment. I mean, it's so amazing to just think about it. The greatness of God, that a fire, what do we use fire for, to refine metals and jewelry and cooking and for other purposes. But if you look at the flame when it's burning, I mean, it requires fuel to burn. There's like two different points actually, and the potter's clay, the mud that human is made of, it does not require anything to burn. It's a solid mass, but a fire needs some kind of source or energy to burn. So when Satan was comparing human and jinn, I mean himself. So I mean, if you logically think that a potter clay would be a solid mass, which is doesn't need any source to burn. And the other point is that when you think about fire, I mean, this is the greatness of God. That can you make anything to a fire to make some kind of living creature? A fire cannot. Fire itself it destroys stuff. But just think about making something alive, a living, a thinking creature out of a fire. I mean, that just puts a lot of, thing that, wow, how God can create a living creature from a fire. We can't even imagine making anything out of fire, you know. That's, to me, that's very awesome.
I got a comment. 27, it says, as for the jinns, 26, we created the human being from aged mud, like the potter's clay. And 27, as for the jinns, we created them before that from blazing fire. But if you look at this again, as for the jinns, we created them before that. So apparently, I don't know why God has to add this in here. Why do we need to know this? That the jinns were created before the human was made. What is the significance of that? I mean, he didn't have to add those two words in there. He didn't do it for no reason. I did find this one, I don't know if this adds to the confusion. 7:12, God said, chapter 7, verse 12, God said, what prevented you from prostrating? I always get this wrong. I don't know if it's prostrate or prostrate. Prostrating when I ordered you. He said, I am better than he. You created me from fire and created him from mud. But I always thought that the human was not in the body yet. The soul was not put into the body yet.
We can't hear you properly.
What? How about now?
Now we can hear you, yeah.
Turn my mic. It's a little. How far do I have to go back?
I think we can start over. Actually,
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the
we were reading 26 and 27. It said we created the human beings from mud in 26. And then in 27, as for the jinns, we created them before that from blazing fire. But if you look at that carefully, it says we created them before that from blazing fire. So it's telling us that the jinns were created before the humans. But why? God could just, what's the point of telling us this? Because you could see if you just take out those two words before that, it's perfectly fine. As for the jinns, we created them from blazing fire. But for some reason, he wants us to see before that. It's like, it seems irrelevant, but it wouldn't be irrelevant if you put it there like that. So I'm like, what's the significance of knowing that the jinns were made from fire before the humans were made from mud? And so I was like trying to think about it. Maybe it's not really a big, just for, you know, Quran study and discussion. Maybe it's not a major thing. So then I go to chapter 38, 76. Chapter 38, verse 76. Satan says, I am better than he. You created me from fire and created him from clay. So he knows that he was made from fire. And from what I understand, Rashad said that the distinction, classification of God's creatures was based upon the decision. If you side with Satan, you're a jinn. If you became a jinn, classified as a jinn. If you decided with God, that one I'm not certain. I would think that was, if you absolutely with God, I'm guess, in my opinion, maybe those are the ones that all became angels. I don't know about that. But there's the wishy-washy ones who are undecided, and then they change their mind before the being put to death, before the test, before this thing started, and they became other entities like animals and stars and stuff like that. But then there's the ones who stayed wishy-washy, and those were us. We became human. Our souls were put into human bodies. So I'm thinking that the human, were they all, that they were not already in the body, the clay the bodies at this point where Satan was asked to prostrate. But Satan already was. He was saying, I'm made from fire. He had already been classified.
So, anyway, okay. Anyway, I'm done.
Yeah.
Sorry if I passed.
Yeah, I would say that before Adam was created on earth, and while his soul was still in paradise, before that he, all the other jinns were in the depository of the souls, right? I mean, for the humans at least, they were all in the depository of souls, and I believe the same is true for the jinns also, because how they're assigned to the different bodies, right? So they're all put to death. But but as far as Satan is concerned, God says he created him from fire, but then as he was a high-ranking creature that was created that way from the beginning, right? But the human being, as created from clay, did not exist. So when God wanted to expose Satan, that's when God decided to put all these souls to death, and then create the human body from clay on earth. So that's so that Satan could be exposed, right, with these conditions. So that's why Satan was created from fire before that. And then after that, all the other jinns, they just came as his descendants, like his children, as Adam's children came about. So all those other jinns came down as jinns. So they were similarly recreated, essentially. I mean, that's kind of like how I see it in my head.
Salãmun Alaykum. Can I share my thoughts?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
The question is, what was angels created from?
Exactly.
The thing is, God says, commands all angels except Iblis. So Satan was an angel, and he was thus created from fire, but it's an allegory. The fire is not human fire, the earthly fire. We see in the Quran it's smokeless fire, and what fire is smokeless? Where, there's a saying, where there's smoke, there is fire, right? But the Quran says
when there's smoke, there are drugs.
where there's smoke, there's fire. That's the earthly fire that we know of. But God says, smokeless
Are you sure
fire.
about that smoke?
Yeah, smokeless fire.
Yeah, where there's smoke, there's Hario.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, so it's like smokeless fire. So it's not like earthly fire. It's not the fire that we know. I mean, what is aged mud? Like if we go out to some river and grab some mud and let it age, is that the mud that created human? No, it's not. It's just an allegory. It says like the potter's clay. Aged mud like the potter's clay. It's an allegory. Sure, there is some form of mud, like some material that is like earth-like, but it's a specific kind of material that we don't have access to on Earth. And it is the same with the fire that the angels were created from. It's not fire like we know of. It's something else, like maybe energy or electricity. I don't know. We don't know what the angels were made of. And I think that's what Satan is referring to. You created me from fire. So that's the word that was.
Also,
that's the word that was.
Can you mute? Sorry.
Huh?
For someone's unmuted, I think.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm gonna. I was finished anyways. Just one small comment. The word, like when you name things, you invent something and you name it. So the definition of that material that the angels were made of was labeled as fire. That's the allegory for it. That's the allegorical label for that material, so that we can understand like somewhat what it could be, like fire. So when we start a fire, when we are gonna barbecue or whatever, and we see the fire, and we're like thinking, oh, like it's amazing how the fire has no shape. Basically, it goes like this in all directions and up and down, and it's almost like breathing. So that's the fire that we know. And then God uses an allegory in the Quran.
Is that any smoke on the sun? Do you see smoke on the sun?
No,
it's a fire.
It needs
it's
oxygen.
a fire. There is no smoke.
It's a fire, but there's no oxygen.
So you think there is a smoke in the sun?
Ahmad.
No. But like I said, it's an allegorical.
But I agree
it's not
with
fire.
Edward.
It's not the fire that we know of.
So
there's no smoke when I turn on my gas stove either.
That's true.
Also when you think of the clay, we know, for example, like Jesus, God says in the Quran that he created the shape of a bird from clay, and it became a live bird by God's leave. So
That's true.
And also
So you're
God, also God mentions
so,
about
so
how
you're saying that like it's like the earthly fire, that the angels were made
no.
earth
I
like
was just
fire?
saying about the clay. I was just
Yeah, the
talking
clay.
about the clay. Yeah.
Yeah, earthly material. The angels are not earthly.
but about the angels, like before Satan was exposed, I guess maybe we're assuming that all the angels are made of the same thing, but maybe they weren't. Because
that's true.
for
Maybe.
example, there's different ranks of angels.
Exactly.
High-ranking angels. So maybe they're made of different things. That's just a
Yeah, that's
Yeah, no, you make a good point.
an
God does
idea.
mention creatures. Maybe angels are ranks, basically.
If they can have different rankings, then maybe they could be made out of different things too. I'm just suggesting that. I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
I mean, this is just like fun information. It's not.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not.
It's not critical, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's not going to get you to heaven if you decide that. Yes, Satan is like my guest star.
What did you say?
I have a verse.
Yes.
As for the angels being made as fire, I don't think so. God says it's the jinns who are made as fire, not the angels. But here's chapter 18, verse 50. We said to the angels, fall prostrate before Adam. They fell prostrate except Satan. He became a jinn, for he disobeyed the order of his Lord. Will you choose him and his descendants as lords instead of me, even though they are your enemies? What a miserable substitute. The subtitle says classification of God's creature. 18, the footnote says when the great feud in the heavenly society took place, 3869, all creatures became classified into angels, jinns, and humans. Oh my God. That means that I might be correct that the ones who absolutely sided were very fortunate and they became angels if they weren't already angels.
Yeah.
They were upgraded.
And God knows what they were created from.
So what's the meaning with the fallen angel?
Oh.
Yeah, but they fell.
Yeah.
But they were already made from something before they fell.
Yeah. Fallen angel. It's called Iblis, right?
Yeah. Iblis was.
So what's the angel made from?
Yeah, what's the angel made from? I'm thinking about smokeless fire. And it's not human fire, earth fire. It's not earthly fire. Some kind of fire. It's an allegory.
So where is that? What you were saying about the smokeless fire? You said it's in the Old Testament or something?
No,
it's on the screen.
That's a good question. Let me see. Where did I get that from?
That was a good verse, Edward. What verse was that you just recited?
18, chapter 18, verse 50, and then he references Appendix 7, and at the very beginning of Appendix 7, there it is, the classification.
Angels, people who upheld God's absolute authority. That means we literally could have became angels. Oh my God.
We missed that.
Yeah,
we
but
missed that
frame. Yeah, Masha Allah.
Wow, we're
That shows our
angels.
stupidity.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, if you pass your test, you could be very happy. I mean, you could be. We were like angels, but we weren't really angels. We can think of it as angels.
I think it's even possible to be a higher rank than
Higher
angel.
ranking, yes.
What? You're
Because
nuts.
Because you have free will.
Yeah, you have free will. Yeah. The messenger.
But what about the justice to them for being the first?
Yeah, but Ahmed, isn't that true? The messenger also talks about it, right? He says.
Yeah.
He said you could be even higher ranked by
it all depends on your soul.
yeah.
Then an angel, or then
I mean,
him,
when we
or
are,
then a
I mean, we're
person?
here on Earth, and we already have soul that is a certain size, right? And it just goes bigger and bigger, and it could be even bigger than most angels. I don't know.
Are you sure? He don't know.
That means some people better watch out. Some of those circumcisers, because if I make it to that,
I'm trying to find the verse.
I don't recall there's a word smokeless
No, no,
even.
it's not. It doesn't say smokeless fire, but it says like fire, and then it doesn't release any, like, not smoke is a different word.
Uh,
yeah.
maybe I okay.
I think for smoke there has to be something burning, like a combustible. But if
Mm.
it's gas, then it maybe might not release
Yeah,
smoke or something like that.
yeah. I think you might have read it somewhere else. Uh,
Maybe.
yeah.
I mean, I have seen it multiple times, so.
Yeah, but Mario is a professional about smoke. So he's the smoke master.
Edward, I'm still laughing that you want to be an angel. I never see any fatty angel, Edward.
Well, they don't have any overweight, chubby, not so great looking angels. Like,
You might need 5 wings.
I'll just have one and I'll fly crooked. 5 wings. Yeah, extra wings. Shut up, Steve. Just kidding.
Yeah, SubhanAllah, I also love when God says, He created a perfect balance of everything. And when you really think about it, that is really elaborate design that God has created, because even if you think about not just like our food, right, but think about the entire food chain and how like it's all perfectly balanced. Like let's say if the population of the bees was like slightly smaller, and you can study the impact of that on the world, like it would be devastating. And same way, if you increase the population of rodents, certain insects would disappear, and it would cause like a chain reaction, and so many other things would happen. And so it's amazing. So every single thing that God has created, when He says He created a perfect balance of everything, and we see that from the yardstick when God compares the 2 days versus the 4 days. 2 days for calculating our provisions, and the 4 days for the entire universe, rest of the universes. And so that should perfectly balance the system is that God has put in place. And so then when you think about God's provisions and trusting in Him, God has calculated the provision of every single person, and He has designed the earth accordingly. So He provides for all of us. Uh, but this, I think, even if people study this perfect balance, that in itself is such a huge proof of the intelligent design that God has put in place. That it's a that's why God says that these are proofs for people, because these really are like amazing proofs. Like it's not anything that would have been just possible to come up on its own. If you like let's say if the bees right now, if the bees disappeared, like I think you were saying that, Ahmed, too, I think the other day, that if these bees, like the title of this chapter is the bee, and so it talks about how God designed the bee and stuff. And so if these bees disappeared, it would cost us billions of dollars, even more probably, to fertilize all of those plants and flowers and everything that the bees just do it so seamlessly for us.
You know, it's the thing about the bees, like they call what the genetically modified seeds and all this. And they have been taking land from farmers because they would find that some of their crops they would have to were growing some of their crops had the some of their genetically modified they found within their crops. But I mean, when you get birds and insects and bees cross-pollinating all the land, and then you blame that person and take and sue them and take their land because they can't pay, it's so disgusting. And then you got bees that are just flying in all kinds of different directions because I believe it's because they're eating genetically modified pollen or something, and something's going wrong with that, my guess. But I think that's so horrible that this is going on, and these companies are allowed to do this and just take over all these farmlands. Different stuff.
I have a question based on what Salman said. God took 2 days to design our profession. And if you look right now, most human beings are trying to have 1 or 2 children. So I think, is it that we're not believe that God designed our provision? That's why we're limiting to 1 or 2, because we believe that we cannot afford them?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people also don't want to have more because of the manageability aspect of it, right? But yeah, I mean, some people will do it not because of that, but because they think that they might not be able to afford. But I think really when it comes down to that, let's say someone does not mind having more children, or they just want 1 or 2 even, but they might not think that they are in a position to support the child. I think it like, for me, like, if like, let's say as a bread earner, not for me, but I'm saying for a man as a bread earner, if a man is if a man doesn't have a means of living, for example, I mean, he shouldn't he should wait until God provides for him. God says to be patient is better, because you have to support the wife and family. But let's say once now you're married and you have a way of living, you have a source of living, then when you do that, then if you want to have children, like, you should know that God is the one who will provide for the child. So doesn't mean that obviously you will sit at home and God will provide. You trust in God, you implore God, and you do your part, and then God will provide for you. I mean, if God is bringing another person into this world, He'll make sure that this person comes with His provision, and He has a set share of provisions that God has specifically assigned to them. So God will make sure that they will provide for it, based on what is assigned for them, regardless of what is assigned for you. But I think also the human being can sometimes be we have to overcome our need to know that He provides. Like, there's many verses in the Quran that talk about this fact also. The verse that says, hold on, let me read that verse. It says, many a creature. It says, Surah 29, verse 60. It says, many a creature that does not carry its provision, God provides for it as well as for you. He's the hearer, the omnipotent. So God provides for all creatures. I mean, there's so many creatures in this world, for example, who are not sophisticated creatures like us, right? And God brings to them one way or another, whether they go hunting or whatever, the prey comes and they'll hunt it, you know. And so I think the same goes for the human beings too. I mean, we're no different. God has given us the ability to go and do work, but God is the one who assigns the provisions, and if you don't trust in God, then obviously he it probably wouldn't happen. But if you do trust in Him, if you implore God and you're righteous, then God will provide. I don't see why He wouldn't.
I remember when I remember when I got my first child. I remember the first thing the accountant said to me, that each child, by the time that child is 18, you need to have $200,000 ready for their education. And I think a lot of people fall into that category where they believe that you have to have this about $200,000 ready by the time that child is 18. So that's why they, just to fill the status quo, they would have children, and then they would end up having one or two children.
Sorry. Can you repeat the first part? I missed it. I'm sorry.
No, I said I hear what you're saying, but I think a lot of people do not believe that God provides, because I remember when I first had children, I remember the first thing that the accountant told me, that each child, by the time that child is 18, you need to have $200,000. The child would have spent $200,000 with growing up and their college education. And I remember his theory. He says if you have two children, then you need to cater 400,000. And of course, that's the theory that most people use out there, and that totally does not work with what God told us.
Right. Yeah, I mean, really, God has infinite provisions, so it's very easy for Him to create the means when the need is there.
And I think that theory of what my accountant said affects a lot of people, especially Asian, because as you can see, Asian before, they used to have 7, 12 children. And now majority Asians especially are having 1 and 2 children. So I think they discount the fact that God has provided provision. They think that they're the ones who have to provide all this provision, and they can barely only have 1 or 2 children.
When you say Asians, do you mean Chinese, or do you mean like
No,
all
Asians in
Asians from the
general.
Asian
I mean,
subcontinent?
especially the ones in North America.
Pakistanis.
Yeah, Pakistan, Bangladeshi, they're number 1 for having one child.
I'm Asian.
Oh, really?
So while on this subject, I have a question. God says that your children and your money will be your test. If somebody voluntarily chooses not to make a lot of money and have less kids, so the test will be easier, would that be okay?
Well,
Somebody voluntarily chooses not to have not to make more money, so they can be. Somebody voluntarily chooses to have
but
less children.
you can't choose beyond what God wills, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's true. But if you have just two children and then you don't want to have any more kids, because your children, God says, they will be your test and your money. So to make your test easier, you say, God, I'll just have only two kids. I mean, it's a question. It's not a comment.
Sounds like a loophole in the testing system there.
Yeah, I mean, you can just bypass the whole test by not having children then.
Yes,
And
another good point.
I was thinking, how can we apply it to other areas? How can I
and,
reduce
and
all the
now
tests?
make any money at all. You must rely on welfare.
Yeah, but even welfare money that comes, it's coming to, it could be your test, you know.
Yes, that's true. But are you getting like $1,000 a month? You pay like only $25. That's not much
Yeah.
on zakat.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, like, getting less money doesn't mean your test is gonna be easier,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
even
Yeah.
getting more money doesn't mean your test is gonna be easier. Even having less children doesn't mean your test is gonna be easier. You know, like,
Mm.
That's true.
uh, you can have one child, and that could be such a test for you.
That
Or
is
you
so
can have,
true.
yeah, because if you want your test to be easy, I think I would think that the right way to do it would just to turn to God more and be more righteous and commemorate Him and grow your soul. And God says,
Mm.
because God says those who reverence Him, He will make everything easy for them. So God will make things easy for us, and our tests will be. I mean, and tests. Our tests would be like you have more chances of success than making it. Which is what we really want. God will make
And
everything easy for you.
and God knows best how to test us, right? So, say if you choose to have less children or no children, then you'll get tested in other ways.
Yeah. Adam, I have friends because I'm a homeschooler. I have friends with many children. And
Mhm.
they always say when they have two children, life is a lot harder for them than when they increase that amount. And a lot of my friends have 5 and 6 children. And they said that when they had the two, it was harder for them. And now that they have 5 or 6, life is easier for them because God just made the children, the older children, take on certain responsibility, whereby when they just had two, or like me, I just have two, the kids do not take on that responsibility. God just make the family dynamic so different. And I've spoken to so much moms, and a lot the ones who have a lot of children, they you from what they tell you, they have a lot less going on than people who have one and two. People who have one and two children are always shuffling the kids around for play dates and activities and this and that. And the people who has many children, the kids end up being the kids' play dates. So I think, yeah. So I think when it comes to testing, I don't think having less children or more children, it's less test or more test. Not from what I've seen.
But is it a sin, like my wife, she wants to have more kids, but we have two and I'm happy with them. I said, let's just, make the best out of them, and then, we should enjoy our life and go out and travel and devote more time for religion, and, instead of just going back into the cycle of having more kids. But is that a sin to hold, not have any kids? I mean, not have more kids or something? Is it a be rejecting God's blessing? Is there any sin part in it?
I don't know about the sin part, but what I do know is when one party wants more children and the other doesn't want to have more children. And I'm not saying, your wife, you already have 12 children and then now you want more. No, I'm not saying that. But based on two, I know there can be a lot of dissatisfaction going forward.
Yeah, I'm more concerned, yeah, so that, if you're refusing God's blessing or something. Because in Pakistan, like this, where in India too, that, they say it's God's blessing. I know many families, they have like 10 children, and when you talk to them, they say, oh, it's God's blessing, we cannot stop it.
Salãmun Alaykum. I'm
Well,
gonna interrupt about the smokeless fire thing. I was
Oh,
wrong.
again. Again, we go back to the smokeless.
We still don't
I
see
don't know
any
why.
smoke around the sun.
I have no idea where I read it because I've read it multiple times. It's so weird.
we,
and I have
Because
only read the Quran from a
you have
certain
no
website.
right to comment on the children, right?
Oh
No,
yeah.
that's okay. I'm gonna have 10,000 children. Inshallah. 10,000.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, it's not smokeless. It's blazing fire, because they say the word blazing is also used elsewhere for the jinns. When describing the jinns, blazing is used twice, and both times using two different words. So it is a blazing fire, not smokeless fire. And I looked at some other websites, some traditional translations, and they are the ones who use smokeless, which makes no sense. Or maybe it does make sense, I don't know. I mean, the sun is blazing and it is smokeless, so maybe that's what they were thinking.
I mean, sun requires energy too. You know, there are nuclear fusions going on in the center of the sun,
Yeah,
and it requires energy. And the stove that we use at home, you know, it has propane or gas that mixes with oxygen, so it requires a fuel, and the outcome is H2O and carbon dioxide. It doesn't have flame. I mean, it doesn't have smoke. So there's sort
yeah,
of all
yeah,
these different kind of fires.
yeah.
What about on the spark? There is a fire on the spark.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. Are you thinking about electricity
Mm-hmm.
or just a spark
Yeah.
from two metals or whatever?
Yeah, that's basically, I think they're like electrons jumping from one to another, and
Yeah, that's a sort of fire as well. But it's not blazing.
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. I mean,
But yeah,
some
we
fires,
only know about fire in this universe. The heat, hot, that burns, fire that burns. And then we know that there is fire that doesn't burn. When they tried to burn Abraham, God told the fire to be cold.
yeah,
So there is cold fire as well.
that's true. That's
So
awesome.
we don't know what the other universe, how fire exists in that universe, how it acts. So that's why I'm saying it's just an allegory for fire. Maybe it's like
Okay.
an energy ball or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, there are black holes that the light does not even,
Yeah,
escape.
exactly. That's worse than fire.
Yeah. I mean, we are living in the innermost universe. There's 7 universes, and the laws and
Yeah.
physics are different in other universes.
Exactly.
Because we cannot find any kind of materials or when God create these 7 universes. We never know.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if suppose I have never
The
tasted,
If you study the Big Bang theory,
Yeah, Big
it's
Bang Theory is the Earth, the Milky Way, not the 7
the Milky.
universes, right?
No, yeah, our universe. The Big Bang is our universe, but we can learn from it. For
Yeah.
example, the atoms and the molecules. No, the atoms.
So
The
it could be.
particles. They
So it.
formed when our universe cooled down. When it cooled down, things started to shape. So maybe the next universe is. It depends on the energy level, basically. So
So
the
it could
so
be
one universe.
any universe before, right?
What?
So maybe it's the universe is already exists before the Earth.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Hmm.
It was a
Yeah, it was
it's a process, long process.
Hmm.
like
But what I'm
God says it
saying
was
is,
smoke.
hmm?
Smoke.
Yeah, God says, before the universe, the universe was like a smoke, and
Yes.
Yeah,
God
yeah,
Yes.
asked
yeah.
Hmm.
them, "Would you come willingly or unwillingly?" And they said, "We come
The
willingly." And
gas, basically,
Yeah. This
yeah,
is
gas.
smoke.
Sorry, yes.
that
The gas,
forms
not
the
smoke. Yeah.
stars, and then this
Because I'm
stars
smoking now.
explode. What I'm saying is,
Smoke again.
our universe.
Yeah. Every
Mhm.
time you say smoke, Hario smokes. Don't
Because
use
I
that
see no
word.
universe here.
Trying to create his own universe.
We haven't
On
had any
weed.
fun.
I'm not on creating the universe.
So one of the questions I have is that this we came in existence this few thousand year back, and the Big Bang happened 2 billion plus years ago, and
Mhm.
there's a long process. Earth was a fire giant ball, and then it cooled down. And as a scientist says that that the universe is expanding, and it's going to rebound back to the center point in a far future. So when the human beings die, would God let it go for another maybe billion years until it rebounds to the center point, and then the day of
Mhm.
judgment comes?
If I think when we get resurrected, time won't exist. So might see it collapse. I don't know. But God says when the God and the angels come, I don't think this universe will work anymore because God's his presence is so powerful. I
Yeah.
think the atoms in this world will stop to function.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Guys,
God.
let's try those who are not actually talking if they can mute because there's a lot of background noise.
Solomon, why you always say that? Everybody's talking at the same time and no problem.
No, someone has a TV on or something, and I mean, I don't know for you guys, but
Oh,
I'm playing it really loud
okay,
so you
never
can hear
mind.
it. Yeah.
No, just checking, just asking. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Masha Allah. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt anyone. I apologize, but yeah, it's just. Uh,
Sorry.
yeah.
Never mind.
So I think about that the verse that talks about this. I think we read it the other day about when it says the stars and the sun and they all crash into each other, right? So that from that description, it seems like everything is in existence, and then this when God comes, this earth cannot withstand God's physical presence, and that's when everything collapses. So So maybe, I don't know, maybe, because I know in another place, the Messenger of the Covenant talks about the implosion as well. Um, so could that all both be happening at the same time? Or, because if the earth cannot withstand God's physical presence in the universes and they all collapse, then it won't continue to expand, right?
Sorry, what else was meant to be happening at the same time, Solomon? I didn't
Well, no,
quite
I
hear
was
that.
saying there was another audio, I believe, where the Messenger of the Covenant was talking about the implosion. Like the Earth universes are expanding and then will implode. But maybe they will implode after the new heavens and the new Earth is created. Maybe it might still be
Mm.
expanding and then will implode.
Yeah, maybe it's the creation of the new universe, or
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought the universe was just expanding, but at the judgment day or when God comes, then obviously a new universe will be created. So I think this universe sort of needs to crack apart in some way for the new universe to be created.
yeah, it would be
That's how
inside
I,
this universe.
yeah. So that's how I sort of understand it.
I mean, Surah
Yeah,
21,
but
God says that it will wrap all the universes and it will be upon his hand, and God will create new, just like he created before.
yeah. So this universe will like it will be destroyed with the earth and everything, but everything will be recreated.
Yeah, that's sort of how I understand it too. Yeah.
And
And
there
we
will
will
be
see
eight,
it. We will see the creation for the first time.
probably, and then there will be eight universe created. That would be the hell, I think.
For those who have to escape God's presence.
I think if I'm correct, the Big Bang is before the bang, the exploding. There was an imploding. That all the
Yeah.
gases
Yes.
were pulled inward, and then they were with the fusion. They made the elements, and boom, exploded, or something like that. So
Yeah.
so I'm thinking that when God says we will fold it like a book, I'm thinking when God comes, everything's gonna go in.
Yeah.
And then implode and then explode. My guess.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Because it's gonna run from him, right?
Well, when you say it's gonna implode, that means
won't-
we're all gonna get reduced to a size of an atom or something, and then we're
Well, that's the elements of our physical body. That we're already, that doesn't matter. Our souls is what matters.
Then he remakes our body.
right. But what about the stars? Because it says the stars will crash into one another.
Yeah, as the God and the angels come.
They're crashing because they're all being mushed into a smaller area, and they're all gonna start mushing into each other. That's what I think. Anyway,
It's like a gigantic black hole.
Yeah, the Quran does mention that the entire universe was first a solid
Mass, yeah.
Solid mass that then God exploded into existence.
I mean, it's an amazing thing. You pick up a giant rock, and 99.99%.
Yeah, but it's energy.
Yeah, but in any matter, like large piece of iron or anything, 99.99% is empty.
Yeah, it's subhanallah.
Wow.
So what I'm trying to say earlier was that every subsequent universe becomes colder and colder, which allows a different kind of some laws and whatever, some sort of existence. And we are the seventh, so we are the coldest universe right now. And then the eighth, which is hell, will be the coldest universe, technically, because there's a lower energy, because it is more distant from God. Are you following
I
me?
wouldn't count on that.
No, but technically it is colder.
Yeah, that makes
it's a blazing hellfire, but it's colder.
There's a whole new type of fire.
Because God says it will all be hell. The entire universe, eighth universe, will be hell, basically.
Yeah, maybe if you're really cold, that's another, that's also worse than sometimes fire. Maybe you go into absolute zero. It's like minus 276 Kelvin. That is like extreme cold. And in one place,
cold as the Ice Age. As cold as that.
But I'm talking about the type of material that will exist. It will be a lower form, a lower energy.
I mean, I don't know if this says in the Quran, but I heard somewhere that the people of hell will come and want to borrow energy from the people of heaven, something like that.
Some
and
light.
They'll say, go
Yeah, I
back,
think in the
which
Quran
is energy,
about
basically.
the light, right?
And they say, go back in time or something.
It's the guidance. They will say, "Let us absorb some of your light, and then we will
Exactly.
They will say, go back and find some, but you can't
They
go
want
back.
energy. They need sustenance because
Right.
they are the
No, I
soul
think that,
now. They are the soul,
Right.
and the soul without sustenance is in pain. So it needs sustenance. That's why they want to absorb some light for sustenance.
Right. I mean, even I think the Mercury or one of the closer planet to the sun, the rotation is so slow that each day is like 31 days or 30 days. It's very slow. So when it comes front of the sun, it gets so hot, extremely hot. And when it goes behind the sun, when the nighttime is too long that it becomes so freezing cold.
Mm.
You know, our Earth is rotating at such a good speed that it is pretty much stays, within a living environment.
Yeah, yeah. And the living environment is so sensitive, extremely
Yeah,
sensitive.
did
yeah.
you say 31 days?
Yeah, one of is it Mercury or the other planet that's closer to the sun? The rotation is so slow. It takes about like 30 days, something like that. It stays in front of the
That means
sun.
that
Yeah.
the daylight is 31 times longer than it is here. That means things would just roast.
Yeah. So like we stay in front of the sun maybe like average of 8, 12 hours. So that's enough to get a certain temperature. Then it starts cooling off at nighttime.
Imagine if afternoon existed 31 times longer. That would be
Right.
That's a long barbecue.
Well, well done. How do you like your steak?
I wanted 31 days.
Burn.
So prepare your dishes then.
Yeah, I'm not hungry anymore.
let's see if Mario wants to smoke up there. He's not gonna be pulling out cigarettes.
Okay, I also wanted to comment on verse 40. I think I didn't notice before how it says, uh, I will send them all astray except those among your worshippers who are devoted absolutely to you alone.
Mm.
So obviously that's pointing to the fact that, all worshippers, there are people who will be worshiping God, but they're not absolutely devoted to God alone for whatever reason. And it's very similar to the other verse where Satan is talking to God, right? Which is in Surah 4, verse 119. I think that's more elaborate. Where he says, God has 118 and 119, 4, 118 and 119. It says, God has condemned him, and he said, I will surely recruit a definite share of your worshippers. I will mislead them. I will entice them. I will command them to forbid the eating of certain meats by marking the years of livestock. And I will command them to to distort the creation of God. Anyone who accepts the devil as a Lord instead of God has incurred a profound loss. He promises them and entices them. What the devil promises is no more than an illusion, right? So this passage I think is more elaborate, and it it shows that he will recruit a definite share of God's worshipers, right? And then it says, I will command them to do this, I'll command them to do that, I'll promise them and this. And so, like, when you think about it, like, how will the devil command God's worshipers to do all these things, right? It's simple. Like, they, of course, he creates some sort of an idol, and then the idols command them to do this and do that, and it's basically Satan commanding them and Satan making promises to them, and this is the definite share of God's worshipers, right? Because and I thought about it before, when I used to look at this verse in the past, and one of the things that it talks about is command. I will command them to distort the creation of God, and so like when I would think about it, like I would not think about genital mutilation and stuff like that, but I would think about people, who like would change their sex, or people who like do like some more other extreme things, right? But we know that those types of things are not done by people who are worshiping God, like someone who wants to go and do all these other things. I mean, they're more likely atheists or disbelievers. But you can't expect something like that from like a devoted Jew or a Muslim or a Christian or someone like that. They will not go and do those types of things, right? But they're more likely to do things if you tell them that God commands you to do them, right? Like how else will you um, get into those types of scenarios? So it's kind of, to me, that sort of is clear, like how when he says that I will sculpt for them on your straight path. And but we know he also comes from all other angles as well, right? But I think this is kind of elaborate when he talks about those among your worshippers who are absolutely devoted to God alone. So only those people, naturally will then be the ones that would be saved.
Good point. Well said.
So,
I think Satan's method is sneaky, being sneaky. It's all about being deceiving and sneaky. And if we study all the things people fall for, they were built up in a sneaky way. Maybe it took 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 10 years, 100 years. There's a build up of social pressure between 100 people. Maybe it takes 2-3 generations for Satan to fulfill his plan, his original plan for a certain community or whatever. So he's infinite. So he doesn't think about, for example, the human being thinks, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this quickly because we have 100 years to live. So we want things to go fast. We need results quickly. But Satan is infinite. Not infinite. I keep saying infinite. Eternal, I mean. And so he's very patient. He plans 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. In that regard, in that aspect. So if we study those, we can see how we can trace how people have fallen to Satan's lies through this very deceiving ways, deceiving methods. And that's what makes it so hard for the people that are suffering to see it. And they can only see it with God's grace, God's guidance. And that applies to us as well. We need to read the Quran. We need to meditate. We need to do salat. We need to seek refuge in God. We need all of that to make sure we don't fall for Satan's deceiving.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a good point. Like, when you look at, for example, what happened at the Nicene Conference, right? So there's just a bunch of people, and many people who fell for it, except for the seven sleepers of Ephesus, probably didn't think it was a big deal. But we can see the results of it now, right? There's billions of people that are doing idol worship just based off of that one thing. I mean,
Your microphone is
they created a new religion.
yeah,
Sorry, I'm outside in the wind.
a lot of wind. yeah, about the Trinity. It was built from the birth of Jesus when Mary went into Zechariah's place. I don't know, maybe had a meeting, and some people saw this infant talk, and then they went to their own communities and spread, like, oh, this child proclaimed himself to be sent by God, and in those communities, then Satan played with their mind, like, oh, it's a child that spoke from the crib and claimed to be from God, and and the story goes from person to person, from community to community, and then Jesus, he grows up, walks around doing all kinds of miracles and strange no human can do, and this fuels Satan uses this to fuel the mind of those people who think that Jesus is like the Son of God or whatever. So, and then 30 years later, and this continues for years. Like, it's not like it came out of nowhere. There were communities spread out throughout the region, and they all had their own theories about who Jesus was. So it was a build-up. It took generations. It took many years, at least 30 years. That's what I can say. So that's how people believed that Jesus was part of a Trinity or whatever, because it came down from authority. Because Zechariah was having a meeting, Mary or Maryam came with Jesus into the meeting or whatever, and these people saw a child, an infant, speak, and these were leaders, community leaders. Zechariah was a priest, some temple, second temple, I think. So he had meeting with important people, like leaders and whatever. So those then went to their communities and families, and they spread the news, and then those news spread further and further. And the source for those news is like a community leader, politician, or whatever, a source of authority in that community. So people trusted the information, and then that information spreads out and gets corrupted and whatever. And that's how you have.
I don't think
That's
you reach your microphone. Sorry.
whose microphone is this?
I don't.
Oh, okay. I don't think he's on the phone. So yeah, that's how the theory of Trinity was born. Like, it was rumors at first, but then with each year, people started to believe more and more. And Jesus didn't make things better, or Isa, we should say. He went around doing these miracles, and people were amazed, like, who is this guy? How can he do that? He must be special. And that feeds into their theory that this must be like a special person, like an angel or whatever. And because Mary was a virgin, the theory about Son of God erupted, because it was the logical solution, basically. So for those people, in their mind, it was logical. So Satan feeds into them, and then every time he made a miracle, it feeds their mind even more. So very deceptive and a very long process. So when they had that meeting, Nicene Trinity meeting or whatever it's called, the belief was already there. The people already believed that Jesus was part of some Trinity or whatever. But the Nicene meeting, they just wanted to establish it and make it public. Like, this is a public narration. And there were, of course, a lot of people who didn't believe that, and they were persecuted and killed. So it was more than just the seven sleepers of Ephesus, or whatever it's called. But they are the ones who survived, the only ones who survived. Or maybe there were more, I don't know, who escaped throughout the world, emigrated. But they were one of who believed in Jesus' true message. They didn't believe in the Trinity, and they knew the truth. And they locked themselves in the cave and whatnot for 300 years. But there were a lot of people who didn't believe in the Trinity, and they were killed, basically. They were persecuted. So, and when you kill people who know the truth, you kind of kill the truth. So that's another tactic by Satan, to kill people who know the truth, to get rid of the people who know the truth, who are witnesses and things like that.
Right.
So that's how the Trinity was born, basically. It was established.
When you're done, can I say something? Are you
Yes,
done, Ahmad?
I'm done. Yes.
Can I change? Can I talk about something different, or is everybody okay?
Yes.
Is it for, do you, before, well, I guess not before, but whenever, Ahmed, I sent you the link, God willing, so I don't actually have my computer, so whenever you guys want to turn off the stream,
Yeah.
you might be able to do it. I don't know if I would have reception or not.
Okay. Inshallah.
Okay.
Go ahead,
This is
Edward.
about I think Steve made a question about the 7 universes in heaven the other day, I think.
Yes, I did.
Okay, and then Solomon gave his input, but I found if you go to Appendix 7,
Yeah.
why we were created, the first subtitle, why we were created, second subtitle, most merciful, and then there's a little chart, a little side thing from the Bible. Right below that, while Adam's body remained on earth, the real person, the soul, was admitted into heaven in the outermost universe.
Yes, I just read that just a couple of minutes ago.
I guess that might answer that thing you were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I only came across it because I was searching for something, and then I thought, oh wow, that's interesting.
Thank God, He's got the answers for us.
Indeed, I have to think about that a little bit, but yeah, it was interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, may God guide us." Well, actually, He already did. It's right in front of you, but you're just got to follow it.
Yes, and then the guidance is right in front of you, and sometimes you don't want to follow it. You know, I'm not talking about us necessarily. I'm talking more about people that reject the message.
Yeah.
I'm actually searching the Quran. I can't find it. I've searched a few times for the verse that talks about how the human is made from age clay, and then also that the human was like germinated from the earth, like a plant, which sort of makes sense. The age clay and being germinated like a plant, because Adam didn't fall down from heaven and get plonked onto the earth. It must have happened somehow. There must have been some physical manifestation of how Adam turned up on earth. And so I was trying to find that verse. So the fact that we're made from aged clay, and there's a lot of clay on Earth, and then that also the human was germinated like a plant from the earth, it sort of makes sense, right? That seems to be a reasonable way to make a human.
Surah 71, verse 17.
Oh, is it? Oh, wow. I've been searching and searching and searching and searching and searching. 71:17, is it? Oh, how come? Yeah, I've been searching for germinated. I didn't find this verse, so I think the search wasn't working. Oh, that's great. Thank you for finding that. Praise God.
What search are you using?
I'm using the Masjid Tucson.
That's why you can't find it.
I knew I couldn't say that to Solomon. I knew I was going to get a response.
I think I knew.
Maybe we're putting.
The funny thing
You're
is,
putting
I keep thinking, oh, the search on this thing is pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with it. I think I keep using it. But then,
Yeah.
today I've searched
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 times for germinated, and I didn't find it.
Yeah, it's
So,
1771. It shows up.
mm,
It shows up on the app. By the way, about the app, I just wanted to let you guys know that there was an update. It's for iPhone. For
oh, yeah.
those who have the iPhone, if you use the Qibla app instead of the
Yep.
submission app, there's the update available. So it seems to have. I fixed a bunch of issues there. I couldn't push the same update on this under the submission app for some reason, but it's there for under the Qibla app. So if you search for the Qibla, the Qiblah,
Yep.
then you can download that one, and it has some improvements as well. If you have an Apple Watch, also, like, you can have the prayer times on your watch as well, and on the clock faces you can set as well. And
Oh, wow.
then it also has, Masha Allah, and then it also has some fixes for some crashes that were happening during the search or navigation and stuff like that. Those were fixed. And then if you have a longer iPhone, like an iPhone 7S or something, then it also supports that now. That's it, yeah.
Good job.
Maybe you were looking up germinated with a capital uppercase G. Nobody got it. That would be turned everybody into Germans. Never mind.
German. Well, I don't know. Yeah, but on the submission app, it's case insensitive, the search. So if you put even if you put it in the capital, it will show up. Yeah. But yeah, I'm the other one probably not. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when I was searching, it looked like some of my searches were producing more results than other searches, even though it's the same search. That's what it seemed like. I could be wrong. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
Inshallah, Salam. Good job. Are you planning to do anything for Android soon?
That's a good question. God willing, not in the near future, but inshallah soon, I hope. Not hopefully not too long, yeah. But inshallah, yeah. Android has been sort of in the back burner for quite some time.
Sumir's own Android too. Hey, Salman, Sumir's own Android too.
They're
Just
second
don't
class. Second class.
Is that San Jose submitters?
Now we
Yeah,
get you through.
inshallah. Yeah, I know. It's just, yeah, God willing. I want to do it, God willing, soon.
Inshallah.
So it must be the disbelievers that have the BlackBerry version of your app.
True believers use iPhone. let's
I can
start
see a
the tech
billboard
war
coming up.
already.
I'm
Oh my god, this sounds like a good novel.
I think you need to tweet.
Just expose a whole bunch of hypocrites.
You guys are idolizing Steve.
So, do you guys have any more comments on the verses?
Yes. Mine was so the same situation where God asks the angels to prostrate. Can somebody tell me what's the way to say that? Prostrate or prostrate?
Prostrate.
I say prostrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been saying it wrong. Okay, so the same story where the same history where God tells us, if we go to chapter 7, starting at 7:12, it describes the same history, the same thing that happened with Satan not
Prostrating.
prostrate.
Prostrate.
And then he calls it the test begins. Rashad put the subtitle above chapter 7, verse 12 to say this is the test begins.
Mm.
It's the beginning of, never mind. The word test is, for some reason, it just sticks out a lot to me.
Oh, because isn't that the time when God is exposing Satan as thinking he can be a god and he's better than the human, for example? Because nobody knew that Satan thought that. So God exposed him by asking everybody to prostrate in front of the human.
I think the concept of disbelief was made aware. People were now aware of the concept of disbelieving God, or that there can be other gods beside God. So this is a test that begins for all creatures.
The first whisper, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a clue to like what's the answer of our existence, why we're here, and how do we get back, and how did this all happen? The test begins.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what are we supposed to do? Because now so then this is a test. How do we pass the test? What is the test? That was the beginning of the test. So what is the test now, and how do we pass it? What is the answer to the question?
Is that a question or is that a...
Both. If anybody has any comments.
It's interesting how we have an open book test, but people want to use another book. They want to use other things. Like, well, you gave us the book with the open book test. You're lucky you have the book in front of you.
Yeah.
Some people don't.
I can't remember, Ahmad, somewhere here you mentioned about the 7 universes in the Earth, and Earth in each universe. I can't remember what that was in relation to, which verse, but I was just going to mention Rashad said the other 6 Earths don't have life on them, and that's to show people that think life was created randomly on Earth that it wasn't, right? And I think those other Earths are like the other planets in our solar system that don't seem to have any life on them. So there'll be an Earth. It will be, I'm not sure what the right term is. It'll be made of the same material as our Earth, but there won't be any life on it. That's how I understand it. But if we ever discover those other Earths, once we discover it, we'll realize, it's just like our planet, but it doesn't have life. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's when we get resurrected, we will see.
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
All our questions will be answered.
Yeah. And then
That's weird.
Sorry, what was that, Edward? We can't hear you that clearly.
Sorry, it's kind of interesting what you said, because now that I looked at it, if we have to wait till after Judgment Day to know that there were 7 other universes with 6 other Earths, 7 total universes. Wait, 6 other.
Earth in each universe, basically. So there's 6 other.
Yeah, if we have to wait until after we die to know that, then it really would defeat the purpose. It's almost like, wait a minute, are people gonna actually? No, they won't defeat.
Possibly, maybe, but also, like, God clarifies all the disputes that we have on Judgment Day as well. So maybe a similar sort of idea.
It's basically just to answer all questions.
Yeah, so that's another answer that life didn't randomly start on Earth. Everything's precisely designed and controlled. And then did somebody mention about the Big Bang? And it sounded like somebody was saying the Big Bang was only the start of our universe and not of all the 7 universes. Is that? I didn't really think that, but is there any evidence for that? I just assume that the Big Bang started everything, all the 7 universes.
No, it started from outward inward, like a bubble. Then you make a bubble inside another bubble, and then you make a third bubble inside the second bubble within the first bubble, and you go on and on. Because the energy has to come from outwards.
But couldn't the innermost or the inner universes, couldn't they be created a bit like how a planet or a galaxy is created? We don't know exactly how how a galaxy comes into existence, but it does somehow. And couldn't a universe be like that? A bit of matter got together and said, okay, we're going to be a universe. So that's an inner universe. I don't know. I'm just trying to think out loud here. Maybe that's not a great. Maybe I need to think about it more.
Yeah, I think I've wrote some theory in my book somewhere where I theorize that. So let's say you have a balloon, and then you blow up another balloon. There's a pressure, and then you blow up a balloon inside that balloon, and then there comes a point where the air in the first balloon becomes pressurized and doesn't allow the second balloon to expand beyond that. It becomes like a barrier.
Yeah.
So that causes a lot of tension between the first and the second. And then you have a third balloon within the second balloon, and that too causes the inside of the second balloon to pressurize as the third balloon expands.
Yeah.
And you go so on until the seventh. And the pressure from each universe, the first universe puts pressure on the second.
Yeah.
And the second puts pressure on the third, and so on. And that pressure is what's, I think, it's what caused the Big Bang, because the pressure caused so much energy into one point, and then that point then exploded into existence, basically, giving the Big Bang. That's the sciencey theory, basically.
Oh, okay.
That's how I think about it.
I don't know. I don't really have an opinion, actually, because I don't know enough.
What was he saying? What was the evidence for it, or something?
Yeah. I guess I was
That's
asking,
the-
what's the evidence for the idea that the Big Bang was only to create our universe and not the 7 universes?
Yeah, we don't know. Just because then it would mean that the 7 universes began with our universe. But then you have to ask, how will the 8th universe exist?
But the other universes have identical Earths, so they must have had their own bang.
Yeah, each one has their own bang. Let's call them bangs.
I don't know.
The first universe, at the center of it, there's a lot of pressure, and then it explodes, causes a new universe, second universe, and third, and so on. Like a star, for example. When a star
I guess the
goes
idea that
supernova. It's just a theory. I'm just theorizing. I'm using what we know about the natural laws in our universe. For example, when a star becomes too dense, it collapses and then explodes into a supernova. So I'm thinking about the universes. They must be huge. There's so much energy. So the universe collapses, causing this pressure that then explodes, creating a new universe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
So maybe that's how the 8th universe will be created. When this universe collapses, the 8th will also be created.
Yeah.
It's just theory. We will see.
Yeah, because I guess the idea that, well, the fact that each universe is inside another universe, it all started from one Big Bang. It's sort of, that would have to be well orchestrated for each universe to, to be created inside another universe, wholly inside that universe.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you go out and inward, but it makes no. It becomes more difficult to understand if you go from inward outward.
Oh yeah.
If you understand what I mean.
I think I do. Yeah.
For example, our universe is the 7th universe, so it couldn't be the first universe. it can't be the one that created all other universes, because all other universes had to first exist before ours could exist.
Yeah.
Because Adam was in the first universe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it is.
Actually, that's another thing I was going to say. I think one of the appendices has a lot of information. I can't remember which one about the creation of the jinns and Satan and the humans, and it was saying that the jinns were created from fire, and the first one was Satan. But I can't. I only saw that when I was searching for something else. Can't remember exactly where it was now, but I think it was one of the appendices.
Do you guys think maybe it's a good time? Maybe we can stop the stream now.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Anyone had anything to say? Let's see here.
I don't.
Oh, yeah, I guess. You mean about the verses, or?
Yeah, about the verses.
Oh, I'm good.
All right, I'm gonna end the stream then.
And maybe we can announce.
Yeah.
The next
Which date is it? I can't keep track of the dates.
Wednesday.
Okay, Wednesday, 9.
6 p.m. Pacific time.
6 p.m. Pacific time. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next Quran study. Join us then, inshallah. And if you have any comments about this or previous Quran studies, please make sure to comment, and we will address them in the upcoming Quran studies, inshallah. And our next study will be Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, God willing.
And our teacher.
And our teacher will be... Who wants to be our teacher?
Did I do it?
Yeah, Edward, you can do it, inshallah.
Or is anybody else on it?
Edward will be our teacher.
Okay.
Inshallah. God willing.
And you will be reading from verse, what, 51? 16, 51. Right.
51?
Yeah, I stopped at 50, so it's from 51 to...
51.
We will see.
Yeah. 16:51, Edward, remember.
Okay. Oh.
Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Is that where the angels tell them to cut? Never mind.
Yes, inshallah, Edward will be our teacher then. So we will see you then, inshallah. Take care.